Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Striper Migration Reports from On the Water. My name's Matt Haeffner. I'm the assistant editor here at On the Water magazine. And like every week, we're going to give you a quick rundown of last week's recap before we jump into the migration this week. Last week, we saw cow stripers from the Chesapeake pull up along the coast of New Jersey, and those fish are still stationed there. But with the May full moon approaching and ocean water temperatures on the rise, they're waiting for their cue to continue north. Earlier this week, anglers from Long Island Sound to southern New England saw another large push of fresh migratory schoolies riddled with sea lice move into their local waters. There's no way to tell exactly where these fish are from unless you catch a tagged striper, but with fish beginning to file out of the Hudson River, many are theorizing that these smaller bass are likely from the Hudson. Over the next week, we can expect to see some much larger fish dropping out of New York Harbor to begin their migration, while the remaining fish from the Chesapeake and Delaware continue their journey. However, this week, we're jumping up the coast to the North Shore of Massachusetts to check in on the bite and the status of the migration just beyond Boston. Okay, everybody, so our first guest this week is a surfcaster from the North Shore of Massachusetts. He's an advocate for striper fishing with large soft plastics, if I'm not mistaken, and he's also a contributing writer to On the Water magazine. Please welcome Steve Gallant. Steve, what's going on?
Thanks. Thanks for having me, Matt. Not much, just, getting into the season.
Yeah, we were just talking about how beautiful the weather's finally been. I mean, we've had nothing but rain all season long, and it's been that way across the coast. So finally getting, some warmer weather, bluebird skies.
Yeah, we've had a lot of cold, rainy, 50-degree days here, and I think it finally hit 80 today. So I think the fishing will be picking up going into the weekend around here.
Totally. And that's great. It's Memorial Day weekend. People have an extra day to fish. So I'm curious, how has all this rain this season impacted your striper season to begin with?
I don't think it's had too much of an effect on the season so far, aside from maybe not helping the water warm up. Some of the bigger rivers, maybe like the Merrimack, might be seeing a little bit of dirty water, but most of the smaller rivers, they've been fine. They haven't been too blown out. It hasn't been a gangbuster start to the season. I'd say it's compared to last year, it's maybe been a little bit of a slower start. But there's definitely some quality fish showing up as we speak.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question was actually, the stripers have been in your area for several weeks now, and it seemed like the first wave of migrators wasn't really schoolies. They were like, just under slot size fish. But now that they've been there for a few weeks, can you describe the class of fish that you're seeing on the North Shore of Massachusetts?
It's a pretty healthy mix, at least what I've been seeing the last couple of weeks. Yeah, you're right. The first wave of fish that showed up, they weren't micros or diaper stripers, as we like to call them.
Yeah.
They were right, below or right around that slot size, a lot of 25 to about 28-inch fish.
Yeah.
There was a lot of herring around. I know the Merrimack had a ton of herring in it the last couple of weeks. So the herring in that area has been a big driver of the fishing. I know there's been some surface activity up there in the mornings in some areas.
Yeah.
I know that there's also been some seine netting boats out along Gloucester that have been chasing some schools of pogies. So we've already got some schools of pogies up here as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been a very good year for herring, it seems like across the entire southern coast of New England, or up into you guys even.
Yep. Herring is a big driver for a lot of the estuary fishing this time of year. So the Parker River, the Essex River gets decent runs of herring still. And the first waves of fish that show up, they are pretty keyed in on those herring. So they know where to find them. And if you know where to find those herring, then you can also find some decent fishing.
Right. Yeah. Setting yourself up for success. And so I know you're a big fan of striper fishing with large soft plastics. We mentioned that in your little intro. So what are some of the, key features or areas you look for when targeting stripers with soft plastics this time of year? I would imagine a lot of it happens in the estuaries like you're talking about.
Yep. We're looking for deeper channels. What I like to think of as choke points. So areas that are, adjacent or near flats. A lot of the areas that I fish, the bass like to get up on the big mud flats during the high tide, and they'll chase bass. They'll chase bait around. And from a surf casting perspective, it's kind of hard to target some of those spots because they do tend to hang way out in the middle of those flats, way out of the reach of surf casters.
Right.
But we wait for them for that tide to change, and when they, if the areas, the channels that they're going to drop into when they come off of those flats, you can put yourself in the right place to be and connect with those fish, hopefully. The other things I look for is just good moving water, rips. If you're fishing an estuary and it's a very sandy or muddy estuary, if you can find any areas that are rocky, those tend to be magnets for a lot of bait fish. You get a lot of crabs that gravitate towards those rocky patches, and the stripers will go in there and they'll eat crabs. They'll eat the bait fish that are, trying to hide in those rocks. So anything different that stands out in an estuary is kind of what I look for.
Okay. And so being that you're, a bit further up on the striper coast, your estuary seasons, probably last a little bit longer than most other regions. So, when do you typically shift your focus from fishing the backwaters to heading out front to the rocks? And, does that change your gear or tackle very much?
It changes a lot of things. I mean, it changes the approach. When I'm fishing the estuary, I'm tending to fish a lot lighter gear. Not, heavy stout rods, but lighter weights.
Sure.
You're fishing in sometimes 3 to 4 inches of water. Or not inches, 3 to 4 feet of water. So, sometimes you're using a 1/4 ounce, sometimes a weightless soft plastic.
Yeah.
I would say that we also tend to, well, at night we're fishing with large soft plastics. So we're fishing with eel imitations at night.
Right.
I like the gravity tackle, I think it's the 13.5 inch.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was going to say 10-inch, definitely, but 13, yeah, it's go.
Yeah, no, just a full-on eel imitation. But we do really well on that. I mean, I caught fish on a 13.5 inch soft plastic last night in an estuary. So it definitely helps weed out some of the smaller fish too. Although we catch schoolies on them all the time.
For sure.
Yeah, when we get out front, usually it's water temperature dependent. So though obviously the water in the estuaries warms up a lot quicker than the ocean front. So
right.
when that water starts to get up into the upper 60s, the lower 70s, that's, usually time to switch gears from the estuaries and go hit the beaches or hit the rocks and look for some cooler ocean water that's coming in.
And you mentioned the water temperature too. That's a huge role and plays a huge role in, release mortality and keeping, once the water hits 70, 75 degrees, especially, I mean, you're going to be looking at a lot more, really a higher rate of release mortality.
Absolutely. And you got to spend a lot more time reviving those fish. You just got to handle them a lot better. Typically, I mean, the fish let us know that it's time to be gone from the estuaries because it's pretty obvious that they're not there anymore. So once we hit a few nights, and usually by the 4th of July, as a rule of thumb, that and the boat traffic, it's really bad back there. I think between the boat traffic and the uptick in water temp, that kind of drives them out. Usually by the 4th of July, we're changing gears and we're hitting other spots.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, we're not looking as far ahead as 4th of July just yet, but with the new moon on Thursday, it's Wednesday afternoon, evening, we're recording this, but the new moon's on Thursday.
Full moon.
So what do you anticipate or rather full moon. Full moon. I'm all over the place this week.
That's okay.
Full moon rather. What do you anticipate will change over the next week in your area with those full moon tides? Will there be, do you think you'll see more pogies up there?
I'm hoping that with any luck, maybe we'll see some of those schools of pogies actually get pushed into the estuaries, which is like a dream scenario this time of year. Like big fish in the estuaries mixed with pogies. That's a recipe for some good fishing. So hopefully that'll happen. It hasn't happened in a while, not in a few years, but yeah, I mean, my hope for the full moon is that we just get, our first real push of big, trophy size stripers, that push into our waters.
Yeah. And so I'm curious also, because we were talking a little bit about the soft plastics. Do you continue to throw those even when there's pogies around in the backwaters, or do you kind of like change up what you're trying to imitate a little bit based on the field?
Yeah, I mean, in the soft plastic sense, I have some large paddle tails, some big gravity tackle. I think they're like 8-inch paddle tails. So those make a pretty decent pogie imitation.
Right.
Also, I mean, it doesn't have to be if you're around pogies. And if I was in an estuary, I would be throwing maybe a big metal lip if I was fishing at night, a dock or some sort of topwater spook if I was fishing during the day. Those would definitely be in my arsenal if I knew that there were pogies kicking around my local estuary.
So not sacrificing size or anything. You're still going for, the bigger bait, but you're just changing up what that bait is how it's going to be presented to the fish, basically.
Exactly. I mean, and you'll still, a large 13-inch soft plastic is not a bad option around a school of pogies either. It's going to stand out. It's something different. I think anytime you're fishing around a school of bait and you can present something different, it can help your offering stand out from, a huge blitz that they might not even get noticed in.
Oh, 100%. I think sometimes matching the hatch is almost not that it's the worst thing you can do, but it helps your odds to give them something that stands out from the crowd. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in the matching the hatch sense, like sometimes you have to really nail that imitation in
Oh
order
yeah.
to sell it, especially not really on topic, but around here with peanut bunker in the fall, the bass get really, really finicky around peanut bunker.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens down here too. It's maddening because it's an amazing blitz, and you could be throwing everything in your bag at them and they won't touch it. But
Yeah.
little Danny plugs and metal lips like that, they tend to perform pretty well.
Yep.
Yeah, the peanut bunker, we don't tend to see them on Cape until like I would say July or something they start showing up. But we've
Yeah,
had
it's
bogeys
usually
too in the estuaries, so
yeah, it's a late summer thing for us usually.
yeah, exactly. So, Steve, one thing I like to do at the end of all these interviews is basically ask you, one piece of parting advice that you could give to striped bass anglers that are fishing north of Boston this week. What would it be?
My advice would be if you're fishing from shore this week, get out there at night, spend some time on your local river. I would probably try to target some outgoing tides. That way you give the water a chance to warm up, and then you catch that outgoing tide. I feel like a lot of times this time of year, I personally do better on an outgoing tide. I think the fish seem more aggressive on an outgoing tide. Get yourself near a river mouth, find some bait, especially out at night. If it's a nice calm night, you'll hear bait, you'll hear fish splashing, especially in a quiet estuary. So it's a full moon, get out there and, spend some time on the marsh.
Absolutely. And that's a great point you made. Final point on the, targeting the outgoing tides, because I mean, 80-degree day, what you and I were just talking about, it's the first like real late spring, summer day. Finally, you're getting some warmer weather, and that's what's going to heat up those backwaters. And that's the time to hit the outgoing.
I think it's going to really get them active going into this weekend. So fingers crossed.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thanks for joining, man, and best of luck fishing during the long weekend and the rest of the spring.
Thanks for having me, and best of luck to you.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Take care.
Take care.
Okay, big thanks to Steve Gallant for joining us this week to discuss the striper migration north of Boston, his approach to striper fishing with soft plastics in the estuaries, and when to start looking for stripers out front in the ocean surf. All right, so our next guest this week is the owner of a legendary tackle shop on the Cape Cod Canal, where big bass have been feeding on bunker, squid, and more during the breaking tides and low light hours. Please welcome AJ Coots of Red Top Sporting Goods. What's up, AJ?
Oh, just a glorious day in Buzzards Bay. Started off with a rainy morning and some lightning. Lost power for a second, lost internet, but you roll with the punches. That's what you get.
I know, dude. It's been such a weird spring in terms of the weather. We had like a couple weeks ago, we had hail down here in Falmouth. I don't know about you guys this morning, but I heard there might have been some hail up that way, which is just nuts for the end of May.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy considering yesterday we probably was close to 90 degrees and sunny. So
yeah, it's insane. So, I mean, how has the water temperature looked in Buzzards Bay for most of the spring? After we're starting to finally see some warm weather, but we have had a lot of rain. So I'm curious, like, I don't fish buzzards too often by boat. I'm curious if you have any insight on, what the water temperatures are like and how that's impacting the fishing.
Sure. I haven't looked recently, but the last time I checked, Buzzards was pretty cold for this time of year. It was like 53 on the surface temp. So,
oh, wow.
Like you said, a lot of rain, a lot of wind this spring. And it's one of those things where it's kind of been a weird year as far as wind goes, because the prevailing wind is out of the southwest.
Right.
But I feel like greater than 50% of the days this year, it's been out of the north.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's totally different than what we've been accustomed to. And that has an effect because Cape Cod Bay is colder than Buzzards Bay, and that's blowing over the land, and you start to see that residual cold weather too. This week we had Tuesday was pretty nice. Wednesday was very nice. I mean, that's the two nicest days we've had in probably 8 months,
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it's getting there, but fishing is better than the weather. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We had pretty much right on pace with last year. I think if you include for the leap year, I think it was like to the day the first schoolie was caught off the vineyard. And then within a week they progressed into Buzzards Bay. And then a few weeks after that, they get more plentiful and bigger in size. So I guess to touch on your previous question, what size fish do we have around right now? And we have good sized fish, easily upper 40-inch fish, and even the smaller fish, slot size and below slot size fish. Those fish have been really, really thick, like more like the shape of a tuna, like super
Yeah.
big shoulders, small tails, and they're eating well, they're gorging on bait, and it's totally a different fish. 10 years ago, the first fish that came up were always the long, skinny streaker style fish.
Right.
It's definitely, from what I've seen, it's definitely not that way this year. They're kind of more on the butterball scale of things.
Oh, 100%. I was going to ask you, like what class you're seeing mostly in the canal. And recently, I don't fish the canal too often, but I've seen, over the past week and a half, really, like a lot more 20-inch fish liced up coming in, and even smaller than 20 inches, like that upper teen size. And they're
Yeah,
all just liced up, but man, they are super fat. And on the south side, I think they're eating mostly spearing, and there's some sand eels and stuff out there too. But now we're starting to see the squid. And I know you guys have had squid in the canal for a couple of weeks. I'm not sure if they're still there or not. So, what's the kind of bait that they're chasing mostly in the canal this week?
sure. So we haven't seen a ton of squid. This year's run has definitely not been as good as the previous few years.
For sure.
So I mean that's one thing that's kind of different. But on the contrary, there's already been some tinker mackerel in the canal, which is way earlier than last year. We have an abundance of herring still kicking around the run. And then early season, there was just acres of herring, which is a great sign. And then we've also, I mean, upper Buzzards Bay and then into the west end of the canal, we've had adult sized pogies already. So, I mean, there certainly is a lot of bait for them to eat and a lot of bait for them to stick around in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking with Steve Gallant about this yesterday. He's up on the North Shore, and he's saying the herring is like the main thing up there that they have going right now. They have some bunker schools here and there, but they seem to be lacking across a lot of the coast. It's good though because we've had herring have played a really important part in the spring migration this year. It's just been a good year for them. It seems coastwide, and I
Sure.
know it's amazing to hear of them still in the canal this time of year. I think last year and the couple years before that we didn't really have a strong herring run. I mean, some of the better runs and obviously the herring run in the canal get a good push, but to know that they're still there and there's those full size baits there, that's probably what's going to keep some of those larger fish around.
No doubt. That and that north wind, man. If
Oh
that
yeah,
north wind becomes a reoccurring theme this year, it's going to be out of the north. It's going to be blowing into the east end of the canal, and it's going to keep those bait fish in. It's going to keep the stripers in. I mean, that can be a recipe for success on keeping those fish from really blasting through the canal and then heading back up the coastline north.
oh for sure. Yeah, the
We'll see
northeast
how it
wind has
plays.
been. Yeah, the northeast wind has been. I mean, up until like you said, Tuesday, Wednesday were like two of the most beautiful days we had this spring. But the 3 or 4 days prior, it was just a steady blow out of the northeast. So I actually focused more on fishing Cape Cod Bay the past week or so, up until we started to see that southwest wind develop. And it's
Yep.
amazing. There was a lot of fish up there, and there's some good size fish too up in the bay already. So I'm curious though, if we're already seeing big fish in buzzards and in Cape Cod Bay, what do you think that is going to happen after this the full moon, which is actually tonight?
Sure. So the last set of moon tides brought a good amount of those bigger fish that the boat guys have been catching in Upper Buzzards Bay.
Mhm.
They brought them into the canal along with some bait. So the last set of moon tides were very good. I mean, all signs point to the same thing for the next set of moon tides.
Yeah.
It's the right time of year. The weather's getting better. I mean, you can't predict the wind, but the wind has kind of shifted a little bit more to the prevailing winds. You add all those things, and the Southwest is going to push it up the bay, and it's going to want to push them into the canal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, definitely all signs are pointing to a go.
So what's the next big thing, with the full moon happening and, there's bigger fish coming up from the Chesapeake still. They're stationed off of Jersey, but I'd imagine a lot of those fish are going to be on the move with this full moon. So what bait do you think that they'll predominantly be chasing? Because I think this time last year, it seemed like we had a lot more pogies in the canal than we do this year.
Yeah, I mean, my guess would be that the adult size bunker will show up. Like when I was fishing the beaches in Wareham with Connor a couple weeks ago, it was one of those days where there was no wind, and we could just see pods and pods and pods of adult sized pogies. Like it was obvious.
Yeah.
We saw 4 good sized pods, and that was probably 3 weeks ago at this point, you know.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, they're already here, but
Yeah.
it appears that they're hanging out more in the rivers, and that they're a lot harder to find with all this wind. You know, it's a lot easier to find them in a calm part of an inlet, you know, where you see them fitting on the surface.
For
But
sure.
for the guys out on the boats, you know, they have those fish finders, so you can definitely find them on the side scan or down imaging. There's still plenty of bait out there. So
Yeah.
if I were to pick one, I would say the adult pogies are going to be what the primary game fish is, or primary bait fish is this year.
Awesome. Okay, that's good to know. And so with those, you know, hopefully those big baits moving into the canal, you know, what are some of the baits that you guys start to see, you know, moving off the shelves and stuff at the shop? Are there any, you know, particular paddle tails or glide baits or anything like that that people really have a craze for?
Sure. So it definitely varies from boat and shore. The boat guys, I mean, the number one lure right now is the dock, the 7-inch and the 9-inch dock. I mean, they year in, year out, they crush fish. We sell tons of them. And you know, and they work because they do a good job mimicking the bait that's around. As far as the canal guys, there's been a decent, I mean, I wouldn't say legendary, but there's been a decent topwater bite this year. So I mean, not every day, of course, but
Yeah.
the days that it's on, it's been pretty good. So we're selling definitely a lot of topwaters, but the old reliable right now, like I would say number one lure is the Fish Lab Soft Mac.
Yeah.
And when they first came out, there was 4 colors, right? There was one size, 4 colors.
Yeah.
Now there's 8 colors, I think.
Oh, nice.
So there's kind of more variety. One of those colors actually is bunker. There's a new color that's bunker, which is pretty sweet. A little hard to come by right now. And then on top of the normal Fish Labs, they just came out with a 5.5-inch 3.5-ounce soft Mac. So just a scaled down version. And if the Tinker Mac decide to stick around, that bait is going to be absolutely insane to mimic those.
Oh, I can imagine. I was going to say that as soon as you brought up the 5.5-inch size, I was like, Tinker Max, that's all day. That's going to mimic exactly what they're doing. And they have they been the ones that, you know, are fueling the blitzes, the Tinker Max, mostly the top water.
Well, they were in for a little bit, but I think, you know, a combination of the herring still sticking around the run, some Tinker Mac showing up throughout the whole length of the canal, and then some pogies also around. I mean, just the abundance of the big three is just very good for that kind of fishery.
For sure. So one thing I like to do, AJ, is you know, if you could give striped bass anglers between Buzzards Bay and Cape Cod Bay one piece of parting advice this week, what would it be and why?
Oof,
Tough question.
That's putting me on the spot. Stella's coming to say hi. Stella, come here. Come say hi to everyone.
Oh yeah, you got to see the shop dog.
Come on, there she is. There she is, coming to make her visit. Yep.
She's about as tall as you are.
Just about. Just about. Geez, one piece of advice. All right, best advice that I could give the surf fisherman is, oh boy, I don't want to use that term. Don't be afraid to move. That's the big thing. You know, don't go out there. You find a good spot. There's not a ton of guys, and then don't go and just robo cast for an hour, 2-3 hours without catching anything.
Yeah.
The reason why the bikes are so important is because you can pack up your gear in 10 seconds, hoof it another few hundred yards or whatever, a half mile, you know, and be active. I think being proactive in covering ground is kind of an underrated thing to do in the canal. A lot of people, you know, they park at the main entry points, the railroad bridge, the herring run, halfway gate, you know, the big 5-6, you know, entry points to the canal, and they tend to not veer away from their game plan. Right. I think being active, I mean, you think about how they do it freshwater fishing. They don't stop moving.
Yeah.
They bang the shoreline on the motor the whole day, or they, you know, they pull the trolling motor, they hammer down on the big motor and go to a completely different part of the lake, you know. And I think that follows suit, and it's super underrated, you know, as far as canal fishing goes, and beach fishing. You know?
I mean, the bike path's there for a reason. It's like you got to utilize it if you're going to be going down there. And if you're jigging the same hole for 3 hours and you're not getting any results, it makes no sense to stay there and continue to work jigs there. You know, it's like you got to cover water just like anything else. So that's a great piece of advice. I totally agree with that. And I got to start heading down to the canal. I've admittedly only been there like 2 times this season. So if they're on top water, that's my thing. I'll get down there for sure.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, virtually every one of our customers would rather catch it on top, but
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do. If you got to resort
Yeah.
to jigging to catch fish, then you resort to jigging to catch fish. So
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, AJ, I thank you for taking the time out of your morning. I know you guys had a bit of a hectic morning at the shop, but appreciate you jumping on, man, and hope you can get some time to get out on the canal yourself these coming weeks.
absolutely. Looking forward to it, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, AJ. Take care, man. Okay, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this week. Thanks again, Steve Gallant and AJ Coots, for joining us to discuss the state of the migration from Buzzards Bay to the North Shore of Massachusetts. We're going to keep this wrap up short and sweet. There are big bass still stationed off the coast of New Jersey. We've got 20 to 30 pounders from the western Long Island Sound all the way through Rhode Island. And with full moon tides carrying us into the weekend, we can expect to see some movement from those fish off of Jersey, as well as the stripers that are currently staged up around the west end of the Cape Cod Canal. Plus, stripers have begun to exit the Hudson River in numbers, so more and bigger bass are on the way for anglers from Long Island to Maine. Remember, if you aren't signed up for On the Water Striper Cup, you can still sign up at stripercup.com. You'll get a sign-up package with all sorts of striper swag from our partners, as well as weekly prize-winning opportunities for catching, photographing, and releasing striped bass. We even have a Rapala Lures photo contest happening on our Striper Cup Instagram page until May 31st. All you need to do is post a photo of a striper that was caught on any Rapala lure, tag Striper Cup and Rapala USA, and you're entered to win prizes from Yeti. The 12 best photos submitted will win those prizes from Yeti, so check out our Striper Cup Instagram page to learn more. That's all for this week. I hope you all have a safe and fish-filled Memorial Day weekend, and be sure to tune in again next week for another Striper Migration Report from On the Water.